Hello, everyone. This is my Girl Scout Gold Award presentation on renewable energy, and it's all about powering a sustainable future by me, Jasmine H. As mentioned previously, my name is Jasmine H., and I'm a recent high school graduate. In high school, I focused on two sciences, including ESS, which stands for Environmental Systems and Societies, coupled with my pursuit of HL biology. As a result, I wanted to utilize the knowledge I've acquired over the course of my 4 years in high school as a way to represent myself, my status as a Girl Scout ambassador, and as an environmentally conscious Michigander that recognizes our privilege to be surrounded in what seems like an abundance of fresh water, a luxury that most people don't have. Due to this, I was able to pursue my passion for environmental sustainability over the course of my 14-year Girl Scout journey, but also through my role as an advocacy liaison for environmental sustainability at the UN, which held the 69th session for the Commission on the Status of Women this past March, but also as a researcher and a national delegate for Girl Scouts, where I've been voted in to serve a 3-year term. As a consequence to all of my actions that led me on this path, I'll be majoring in a 5-year bachelor's to master's program with a focus on environmental engineering this fall. As aforementioned, this presentation is for my Girl Scout Gold Award, where I set a goal of at least 100 participants. Thus, scanning this pre-presentation survey helps me quantify the impact that the information I'm about to present on will have on the people taking time out of their day to listen to me speak. With that in mind, I would really appreciate it if you fill out this survey and take the one after that will be posted once I finish talking about renewable energies, as they take less than 5 minutes of your time. Please and thank you in advance. And without further ado, I'll be discussing about the different types of renewable energy and their importance on powering a sustainable future. So what is renewable energy? Renewable energy is energy that is obtained from natural sources that can be renewed naturally, such as the sun, wind, water, biomass, and geothermal energy. Unlike fossil fuels, renewable energy will never run out and has a lower environmental impact. Some types of renewable energy include solar power, wind power, hydropower, biomass energy, and geothermal engineering. And each type of renewable energy has its own unique way of generating electricity without significant carbon emissions. So the difference between carbon emissions versus being carbon neutral is that CO2 is a primary greenhouse gas. So other greenhouse gases would include water vapor, methane, amongst others, but those three are the main focus. And CO2 is emitted through human activities, which over 80% of all U.S. greenhouse gas emissions are CO2. And this occurs when carbon fuel like gasoline, coal, or wood is burned. Although small amounts result from respiration, like cellular respiration and regular respiration that we do, like breathing in and out, but also the decay of organic matter. But nonetheless, CO2 is created by burning carbon fuels and is a polluting carbon emission, while carbon neutrality is the balance between emitting carbon and absorbing carbon emissions from carbon sinks. So carbon sinks would include trees or oceans, or simply eliminating all carbon emissions together. Carbon sinks are systems that absorb more carbon than they emit, such as forests, soils, and oceans, like I mentioned previously. So the first type of renewable energy is solar energy, and solar energy uses photovoltaic panels to convert solar insolation, which is sunlight, or solar energy, into electricity. And solar energy has great potential all over the world. For some advantages, it's immensely abundant, as it's the most abundant energy source on the planet. Additionally, a tiny fraction of the sunlight we get every day can provide a huge amount of energy. For example, 1.5 hours of sunlight meets all of humanity's energy consumption for an entire year. Additionally, solar energy is getting more efficient, cheaper, and generates minimal greenhouse gases, so no emissions, and it means it has a smaller carbon footprint. While some disadvantages are that it's expensive, so the installation of solar panels can be upwards of 20,000 USD, but it's also weather dependent, and that makes it not as equally efficient all over the world. So if you lived in Iceland, for example, it wouldn't be as beneficial as someone that's living in California or Florida and other places where it's mostly sunny all of the time. Also, it has high land usage, and if we all implemented solar panels, that would take up 0.8% of the US land in order to meet energy needs. And because of the solar panels and how they're created with the photovoltaic panels, it creates a lot of waste generation. So by 2050, it's estimated that 78 million tons of the landfill will be a result of the panels that are utilized, which causes environmental damage and a lot of harm. So here's an example of what photovoltaic panels or solar panels can look like. And next, wind energy. So wind energy is generated by wind turbines, which converts kinetic energy, which is movement, and it turns the kinetic energy or movement of wind into electricity for us to use. This is advantageous to us because it creates good paying jobs. So just by creating the wind turbines, that can result in 150,000 plus jobs. But it's also cost effective. Additionally, wind power is a domestic source that enables economic growth. And for example, this can be seen as wind energy is 10% of the country's energy here in the US, and that resulted in 20 billion USD in economic growth for the US. Furthermore, wind power benefits local communities. Like I said before, it's a domestic source which can help a local community achieve upwards of $2 billion in economic growth. But they also can work in different settings for a different type of usage, like agricultural, coastal, island, etc. But they can still be seen as disadvantages, as wind power must compete with other low costing energy sources, and because they're huge, they might not be seen as the most cost effective in terms of other low energy sources that have cultural inertia attached to them. Additionally, turbines can produce noise pollution, which means that it can cause people to lose sleep or alter life schedules because of the noise that is coming from the kinetic energy of the wind. And it can also alter the visual, intrinsic, and other types of aesthetics of the setting that they're in, which can lead to different things like a lack of buyers trying to live in that area because of the visual impairment that comes from wind energy and wind turbines. Furthermore, wind plants can impact local wildlife, and that can be detrimental in environments such as rural areas. So, as we can see here, this looks like a rural area where the wind turbines were implemented, but it's very mountainous, and because the altitude is higher, that allows for more kinetic energy to take place. For hydropower utilizes flowing water to drive turbines, which is the divides between the dam in order to generate electricity. So this has many advantages as hydropower generates the greatest amount of water in regions with higher precipitation and rainfall. But it also stores a lot of water through its dam system, and it acts as a water bank that a specific setting can utilize in order to control how much water should be utilized over the course of a year or a different time span depending on the place in which hydropower is utilized. Furthermore, the best means of electricity generation is hydropower, as it makes up 17% of the world's electricity, and it's more efficient as it wastes less river and fresh water in general. Lastly, hydropower plants offer flexibility and security for electricity systems, but also have a low carbon footprint and allows for economic investment in LEDCs, which are less economically developed countries, and that allows them to have recognition for MEDCs, which are more economically developed countries, so they can gain funding and infrastructure and development in that country. But they do, like anything else, have environmental damage, such as destruction of a habitat, but also fragmentation, as the creation of dams splits land into two or more pieces of habitats, which can lead to more environmental destruction, but also flooding, and it affects migration movement of aquatic life. It also results in unstable water cycles, and that can also be a result of climate change. So that's not necessarily all hydropower's fault, but it is an influence. And it's also becoming more expensive as more countries are investing in it, but it also results in water wars and water conflicts, and that can be seen with the Nile River and the Great Renaissance Dam that is implemented in Egypt and is a fight between Egypt, Ethiopia, South Sudan, and many other countries that utilize the Nile River as its main source of fresh water. And here is a dam in China that is being utilized right now. For biomass energy, it comes from organic materials such as wood, agricultural waste like corn, which creates ethanol, and garbage. This can be converted into electricity, heat, or liquid fuels through combustion or biochemical conversion. This is advantageous as it's low costing because it grows on arable land. Arable land is important as it's nutrient rich, it has a predictable climate, and it's good for growing crops in general. And it utilizes less land as it only accounts for crop waste and it doesn't produce more crops in order to create the biomass. Additionally, it generates and can be used as organic fertilizer. It prevents health issues as it's less toxic as the chemicals and pollutions that come from fossil fuel usage, and there's a decrease in the loss of biodiversity as it does use organic materials and waste. Furthermore, it has reduced greenhouse gas emissions because biofuels are carbon neutral. But however, it contains impurities like salts, vitamins, minerals, and nitrogen. But it also has few technological developments as companies have pulled its funding from the use of biomass energy because it's not as well utilized as other forms of renewable energy. So companies like ExxonMobil, after 14 years, decided to give up on biomass energy. But also, its disadvantages as it has a huge reliance on agricultural waste, which could therefore be used for something else. Here, biomass energy can be seen with algal biofuels, which is mostly used, well, sometimes used for cars and other methods of transportation, but it's not that great considering other types of renewable energy, so it's not utilized as much. But it will be in the future as more technological advancements continue. For geothermal energy, it harnesses the heat from within the earth to generate electricity or heat. And this is good because it's low pollution and carbon emissions, as it emits 97% less carbon emissions, which decreases acid rain, causing sulfuric oxide compounds, and 99% less CO2 than fossil fuels. But it's also consistent and a stable source of energy along with a small land footprint, as it's just utilizing the energy within the earth to create electricity and heat. So geothermal energy can be utilized any time of the year. It can be used to heat or cool your house or any building that you're in. And it's also cost efficient in the long term and effective as this method of energy can be utilized from 30 to 50 years. However, it has high initial and exploration costs, and this can be a result of the lack of technological advancements and public awareness about geothermal engineering, so not a lot of people invest in it. But it's also location dependent, it has limited scalability, and it has a noise and voice pollution impact. Nonetheless, here is a geothermal energy power plant, but it can be seen as a result of being location dependent in rural areas or mountainous areas. So the overall benefits of renewable energy is that it reduces greenhouse gas emissions, it diversifies energy sources, and it increases energy security because you can't utilize one type of renewable energy source alone. The goal is to utilize all of them or multiple so you can reduce the amount of fossil fuel usage and hopefully become full 100% reliant on renewable energy sources in the future. So I would have an activity for those that did a live presentation or in-person presentation, but since this is a voiceover, it'll be skipped. A key takeaway that should be noted is that renewable energy is the key to a sustainable future. As renewable energy is the key to a sustainable future, this can be seen by adopting this technology, which we can reduce our dependence on fossil fuels and protect the environment for future generations. Why should we care about renewable energy sources? Well, in the US, the effects of harmful air pollutants from nitric oxides and sulfuric oxides are linked to an estimated of 300,000 premature deaths per year. And renewable energy is making the air and water in our communities cleaner, which improves health outcomes for vulnerable groups such as children, pregnant women, and the elderly, and saving Americans as a whole upwards of $77 billion a year in health costs. It also diversifies our energy mix by protecting the fundamental human right to a healthy, safe environment. Proximity to industrial facilities exposes Americans to contaminants, particulate matter, and carcinogens linked to higher rates of premature death, cancer, and chronic respiratory conditions. Thus, by diversifying our energy mix to include renewable energy, Americans across the country are seeing improved health outcomes and health benefits from reduced mortality ranging from 65 billion to 250 billion by 2035 alone. Reducing air pollution can also avoid between 2,900 to 4,500 premature deaths by 2030, in addition to preventing 76,000 to 119,000 asthma attacks and 312,000 to 484,000 lost workdays. Thus, the adoption of things like electronic and electric vehicles is reducing exhaust emissions of NOx, which are nitric oxides, and harmful fine particulates, which cause severe respiratory diseases. Finally, energy efficiency measured in homes and buildings are helping ensure good air quality, healthy temperatures, and lower humidity levels. And these measures can reduce the incidence and symptoms of heart and respiratory conditions, allergies, and etc. They also provide physical comfort, which supports mental health and well-being. So here are some YouTube videos that can help talk about the importance of renewable energy sources. Why this all matters in the grand scheme of things is because generating energy that produces no greenhouse gas emissions from fossil fuels and reduces some types of air pollutants is beneficial because it mitigates further risks of climate change. Additionally, diversifying our energy supplies and reducing dependence on imported fuels creates energy security And this can be seen in the US as we're semi-independent, but we still utilize fossil fuels from the Middle East, which makes it semi-independent, not fully independent. Also, it creates economic development and jobs in manufacturing and installation. Furthermore, sustainability. However, even if we stop using coal right now, the damage is already done, and Earth is reaching its tipping point every day and creating more positive feedback loops, such as permafrost melting, ocean acidification, the albedo or albedo effect, depending on how you want to say it, and many more things because of all of the fossil fuels we're currently using right now, but also because of the ozone and how it interacts with these greenhouse gases. Lastly, this can create climate refugees as people from tropical climates have to migrate to seek shelter and a new home after detrimental natural disasters that have resulted from climate change, but also diseases that spread from tropical bugs such as mosquitoes, and that can increase cases of malaria, and other things of that nature. And the US is not exempt from these problems because we've already seen how climate change has impacted us when it comes to natural disasters, such as over $1 billion needed to redo the infrastructure after hurricanes and droughts and flash floods and things of that nature. Again, I had another activity planned for people doing virtual or in-person presentations with me. And some current usages of renewable energy sources can be seen all over the world, with some leading countries including Costa Rica, which produces 98% of its energy from renewable sources for 8 years in a row since 2020. It is as seen from 2022. In 2022, Sweden reached its goal of utilizing 50% of renewable energy 8 years early, and now they have a 2040 goal of 100% fossil-free renewable electricity production. The US is a global leader in offshore wind energy, powering 7.5 million homes. In 2015, Iceland generated almost 100% of homes with geothermal energy. So that was 9 out of 10 homes that utilized geothermal energy. In 2021, Uruguay generated 98% of electricity from renewable sources, which most of it came from wind power. In 2022, Germany's new government set a target of 80% of renewable energy power by 2030 and wants to be close to 100% by 2035. Kenya is home to the Lake Turkana wind power project, and it's currently Africa's largest wind farm by generating 310 megawatts of capacity, which is energy for 1 million homes. And Morocco is a world leader in solar energy and home to the world's biggest concentrated solar farm with a capacity of 580 megawatts, which is the size of 3,500 football fields. Some additional countries would include China, which is a global renewable energy leader, hosting nearly half the world's total operating wind and solar capacity. And China's on track to double its utility-scale solar and wind power capacity, surpassing the government's 2030 target of 1,200 gigawatts 5 years ahead of schedule. They're also the biggest investor in renewable energy worldwide, where nearly half of the world's low carbon spending took place in China in 2022, which resulted in 546 billion USD. Additionally, 84% of New Zealand's electricity usage is renewable, and New Zealand has set a target of 50% of total energy consumption from renewable energy sources by 2035 and 100% renewable electricity by 2030. As of 2016, 98% of energy generation in Norway came from renewables, with hydropower leading the charge. And they've been harnessing power from rivers and waterfalls since the late 1800s. And over the years, they've added thermal and wind energy to the mix. So for some international agreements and efforts related to renewable energies, one would include the IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which assesses and creates assessments about the science related to climate change and how we can combat it. The 1987 Montreal Protocol, which was implemented to protect the stratospheric ozone layer by banning ozone-depleting substances that were used in refrigerators, air conditioners, fire extinguishers, and aerosols, and replaced them with more environmentally friendly options. The 1997 Kyoto Protocol, which reduces emissions of 6 greenhouse gases, including CO2, methane, and nitrous oxide, and the Glasgow Climate Pact, which is COP26, but also COP21, which decreased coal usage and increased renewable energy sources. And then the UFCCC, which is the Energy Charter Treaty and the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. And then the 2015 Paris Agreement, where countries pledged to reduce CO2 and other greenhouse gas emissions and adapt to the impacts of climate change. And then IRENA, which is the International Renewable Energy Agency. So here we can see the difference between mitigating and adapting to climate change and how renewable energy sources can kind of fit into these Venn diagrams. Here again, we can see how we can help increase climate resilience, and renewable energies are a mitigation. So we can see that with clean energy and energy efficiency. So what can we do right now? So we can utilize public transportation or carpool to reduce carbon footprints and overall eco footprints for each person that you carpool or utilize public transportation with. Eating on a lower trophic level, which means less red meat and dairy, which can help reduce 14.5% of the overall CO2 emissions that are a result of agriculture, as agriculture is 70% of water usage and majority of the reason why we have so much CO2 emissions in the first place. So just eating a plant-based or majority plant-based diet can help reduce CO2 emissions, but also help reduce food miles by buying locally produced foods, even though that's not a privilege that everybody can afford. Just doing it once in a while by going to a farmer's market or an Eastern market can help reduce the CO2 emissions that are a result of the transportation. Purchase reusable items, conduct an energy audit at home, which can decrease gas, oil, and electricity usage, and geoengineering. Although there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding geoengineering, large-scale projects such as artificial trees seeding the ocean, cloud seeding, reflective aerosols, carbon capture and storage, things like that can help reduce greenhouse gases and the global climate change crisis. So here are my resources. And here's my bibliography to showcase that I am very passionate about the things that I'm doing. Thank you so much for listening. Here's the post-presentation survey. I'll leave that up for a few seconds. And if you have any questions, you can contact me at jasmine@singlefamilyliving.org. That's the email that I check the most, and that's the email that I'm allowed to give people so they can contact me about this project. Thank you. Please and thank you in advance.